right. Well, I have a feeling we might get some late joiners here, but I want to make the best use of everyone's time. So let's get started. Thank you, all of you, for coming on a Sunday. And I especially want to thank Tom for being willing to take time out of his spring break with his daughter and wife in Ohio, and talking with us today. Tom is the dad of one of our students who's Ozzy's student, Annika, and Annika's been a student of ours for years, first in person when she was much smaller, and now she's in seventh grade and still working with us online and worked with us throughout the pandemic, which we're really grateful for.
Mhm.
And Tom is wonderful. Tom's been a part of my kids' school community, was before Annika left, and also just been a supporter of our code coaches. He actually hired one of our former code coaches, Zeph, who happens to
Mhm.
be my nephew, and to work where he works at Adobe. And Tom, would you mind sharing what the work that you do at Adobe and what your position is there?
Yeah, so I'm a senior manager at Adobe, and I work on a product called the Adobe Experience Platform, which is basically customer data platform. When you think of when you're, log into a site for, the major Fortune 500 brands, when you log into their site, Adobe Analytics is used to collect your, kind of your navigation, your activities when you purchase something, when you show interest, add something to a cart. But the lesser known part of the Adobe Analytics and Web Analytics is probably best known. And that was from an Omniture acquisition that Adobe made like in 2005, so a long time ago. And in the ensuing like 16 years, Adobe has purchased a number of other products, the data management platform, which is collecting, when you may not be aware, but well, actually, you're all engineers here. So open up your developer tools and look through the get calls being made when you're navigating through the web. If you see a host name Demdex, Demdex, that is associated with the Adobe Audience Manager product. And what that is a data management platform that collects anonymous data from navigation across the internet. If you've gotten emails, take a look at your HTTP calls when you're opening up that email, and you'll see that there's interactions with the Adobe Campaign product. And Adobe Campaign was originally Neolane, and that was acquired in 2010. So what Adobe has done, I came in an acquisition in 2016 from 2Mobile, and what we do is real-time bidding, programmatic bidding on when you go to a website. We have about 30 milliseconds in order to review your cookie, understand your prior navigation. We use Aerospike, like basically a fast access indexed data store in order to look you up, figure out which groups that you're in that are of interest to a particular advertiser. We figure out which advertiser is going to pay us the most money, to present you an ad. And then we basically bid upon that ad for that website and say, hey, we'll pay you this portion of a penny in order to display this ad, right? So if you think of the full gamut of marketing technologies, I work from everything from web analytics to anonymous user profiling into audiences to programmatic bidding on advertising space. We also do real-time targeting. So when you come in and you express an interest, like say you're interested in ski boots, somebody who buys ski boots is interested in ski bindings. We will basically say, you're interested in boots, you may be interested in bindings, and we'll do real-time personalization within the website based upon your activity, saying you are likely to do this additional action. So the space that I've been working in, and I did mobile advertising on the Palm 5X, and that probably predates a lot of you. A lot of you were probably
I had
born
a
yet
Palm Pilot.
when that came out, but we started with mobile ads on the Palm 5X when I first started in the industry over 20 years ago. And so I've kind of seen the entire, from the software standpoint, like I've always been in kind of the open source kind of community. Apache that's where I really cut my teeth and learned the old NSAPI on Netscape, and that's really how I was introduced to browsers and HTTP and web technology. So that was my foundation of like how I was introduced into the industry. Prior to that, I'd done C++ and COBOL and and BASIC. I started programming in the 80s, like when I was in elementary school. But it really was the web was the loud sucking sound, that just pulled everybody into the industry that had any notion of how to program computers. So that was like in the late 90s. I was, I'd started some companies, and I was graduated in engineering and started a company, and then my friend in Oregon said, "Hey, Symantec needs engineers. Like, are you interested?" And I looked at my doctoral path, and I looked at working on software, and I said, I think software is the way to go. So that was 20 plus years ago, and haven't looked back. It's been fun. I think one of the key things is that I really enjoy is that I probably spend about 20% of my time every week learning about new technologies. So if you want to stop learning, this is not the industry. If you want to work on the new cool stuff, right? Because there's still COBOL programmers like programming for ATMs. There are jobs for that. But if you want to work on the new cool stuff, it's constant learning is really
we had a student who was interested in COBOL who Eddie worked with for quite some time, because his uncle was in the finance industry and said everybody working on COBOL is retiring or they've died, and we need more COBOL programmers. So yeah, it's funny you mentioned that.
And it's really interesting how the industry has evolved just over the last 20 years, because there's many dimensions to development, and with outsourcing, probably about 8 to 10 years ago, it really started kicking off. And so what you see with the developers now in the United States versus development overseas, like the key for our productivity and efficiency and maintaining relevance within the United States doing software development is built around cross familiarity, right? They want full stack developers familiar across the stack with subject matter expertise, because that combination of not just understanding the code and how to write the program, but understanding what is the goal of the user of the software, understanding that cultural context, understanding the success patterns, understanding when does it work? Like, yes, I get this number, but is this number bad? Is this something that's going to cause a problem or not? And so the real specialization of software engineering within the United States right now, and what has maintained relevance, has been the ability to work across your data, work across the code, work across your customer, work across operations. And with cloud, like I've been in cloud and Hive for the last 10 years doing big data and now machine learning and artificial intelligence. And it's that familiarity across the spectrum, right, gives you the ability to basically plug into a new area and say, I may not know everything right now, but I can learn it fast enough to be able to get it to a reasonable space. What's been interesting with my Adobe experience is that all of my experience previously has really been startups, like small startups, like I'm talking less than 100 people, right? And so you're a really small boat in a very large ocean. And so startups are looking for people who can move fast, exercise reasonable judgment, and go. It's like there's very little time for you to really reflect on it. It's more like get it out there, figure out the problems, iterate quickly, and move fast. Adobe is different because it's a large software organization, and what they are looking more for is they're like, okay, people that fit into this particular area and are going to work in depth within a particular portion of the product. So when you look at the different organizations that you're applying to, they will definitely have a different orientation of what they really are hoping to get from your contribution. Like, how are you going to be helping, kind of move the dial within my organization? So one of the key things to understand is, where is this product within the life cycle of this company? Is it the only product that the company has? And so pretty much everybody's working on this, and everybody's kind of working on the edge in order to get it to be commercially viable, right? Think of the maturity curve. You have early adopters, you then have kind of the emerging, and then you have a mature software product, right? Those are kind of the three stages. In the first, if it's just, hey, you're just early adopters, you're working very closely with customers to understand exactly how you can help them be successful and iterating very quickly. In the emerging side, what you're doing is you have a pattern of your software, and that software is working. It has been shown to work for a known set of customers, the early adopters. You think you've got the secret sauce, but you have all this crappy code that you wrote in the early stage because you had to. You didn't have any time. Like, there's been times where it's like, huge customer, great, we sold them, we're going to make this money, we have 2 weeks to deliver, right? That is startup, right? The emerging is more like, hey, we have these 50 customers who are onboarding over the course of these 3-4 months. These are the stability issues that we're running into, or the scaling issues. This is how we're taking a ton of people that are right now just manually fixing things as they're going. It's like, wait a minute, we need monitoring in place. We need to, restructure some elements of this code. We need to scale it better. So that's where you're in the emerging phase, is you're basically taking the pieces where you've identified key advantages from your startup experience to basically say, we need to scale this. And then on the maturing side, when it's a mature product, what you're effectively doing is, how do we continue to maintain, reduce the cost of goods sold, run it more efficiently? So it is more like, how do we, kind of stabilize this? And so what's interesting in Adobe is I deal with all three of these right now with Adobe, which is a lot of fun, but you have to understand the context, which are being plugged into each of these, into these products. What is my role in this product? How am I helping to move the dial? Where can I help? Where can I not help? And having that, kind of self-knowledge of like, I don't know how to do this. I need to learn how to do X, Y, Z in order to be effective here. That clear communication of where you are, what you can do, what you can't do, what you're confident in, the areas where you have gaps. As a manager, hiring an engineer, I want an engineer who is self-aware enough to say, hey, I'm in trouble. We have 2 weeks to do this and I'm floundering. As a manager, if you give me 2 weeks, we can deal with that. As a manager, if you give me a day and say, hey, this thing I promised you, I'm floundering and there's no way it's happening tomorrow, that's a problem, right? So you need to be honest. And that is, if I look at the, trust yourself, trust your capabilities, and be honest, because what we need to do as much as possible is help you be successful. My job as a manager is to make you successful. I want you to achieve your objectives. I want you to challenge yourself and to meet these objectives, and I want to equip you to be successful. Because when you, as my engineer, are successful, I am successful as a manager, right? It's kind of like, it's a partnership here, right? And so understanding that and developing that relationship with your manager is key. So in the interview process, you're really looking for, how do I be truthful about what I can do, convey to them, I'm interested in these areas. These are my strengths. These are the things I do really well, right? Because if you get a job and start a job that you don't like, and they're telling you to do things you don't like, you hate writing SQL, and I need a data, kind of somebody with strong data analytical capabilities for the, like, you're going to end up in a spot where you're waking up every morning and you're just like, God, I hate this job, right? So you really have to look at yourself and look, like, what are the things I'm excited about doing? What are the exciting parts of the job that I get up in the morning and I'm like, I'm looking forward to these challenges. And no delusions, all of us get shit sandwiches. It is the way that it works. There's a reason we call it a job. You're getting paid to do something. And there are going to be parts of it that are drudgery and monotonous. And as much as possible as software engineers, what we're doing is saying, I really hate doing this. I see that we're going to need to do it many times. I'm going to automate this. I'm going to make it so other people can be trained on this, so I'm not the only one owning it. so it can be maintained and managed by other people as well as myself. So in short, have that reflection on what you're doing, why you're doing it, the context of the product and how you're plugging in and contributing to the success of the organization. And so when I'm interviewing for that, what I'm looking for as much as anything else is some self-awareness, some consciousness of these are the things that I'm passionate about, that I feel like I'm very confident, I enjoy learning and growing and developing my skills in. And so I kind of look at, I kind of classify it in three ways. It's kind of like initiative, learns fast, and then the collaboration, the ability to work, to work things out, to clarify, put things on paper, solving problems as opposed to basically, kind of the dark side, which is just like, man, this sucks again. And it's like, wait, there's always going to be things that suck. That's just that's just life, right? But it's just like, how do we stay on the positive side? And you want to stay on that positive side of like, I ran into these problems and here's how we work through them. Here's how we evolve them. These are the challenges we ran into. Here's how we overcame these challenges. And this is what I learned from this. And these are mistakes I made. And this is how I learned from those mistakes, because it really shows a degree of kind of self-introspection to be able to say, hey, this person is going to be able to develop judgment, develop good judgment. Because doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is insanity. So we need to be constantly getting better, constantly more efficient, constantly learning from our mistakes, and that's how we will get better. So that's really, from a high level, this is kind of metaphysical, but it is a journey. Our careers are a journey. I'm still on that journey. I'm still enjoying learning. I started learning Azure 2.5 years ago. I'd never logged into it before. And they said, hey, we're using Azure, figure it out. It's like, okay, how can I use it? What is it good at? What is it bad at? I've used AWS before. How is it similar? How are the technologies related? And so it is just learning on top of that, picking up the technology, identifying opportunities to use something new, but also not risking a project saying, hey, this new thing that I don't know how it's going to work. It's like, wait a minute, that project has to be delivered. There's a lot of money on the line, too risky. Let's go with a tried and true. Here's a proof of concept that we want to try, much more reasonable. Let's try something new there and see if we can develop some new skills within the team and kind of incorporate this new technology. And so a lot of what I'm doing right now is helping Adobe go from C++ on-prem into the cloud. Like, how do you take that mentality and shift it to like, here's modern architectures and here's how I use modern architectures given the current state of the software. But don't be deluded. There are pieces of software that are on-prem, C++, COBOL. They are working. There's no additional money to be made by refactoring that or redoing it. So fixing something that's not broken, we don't get paid very much to do that.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the kinds of positions you're currently hiring for?
So the positions right now that we're looking to fill are within my group in particular is within Java, kind of strong Java development and with data, but full stack. I mean, you're talking React Spectrum, Java, Java core, and then hybrid cloud, on-prem Postgres, AWS, S3, Redshift. You can think of, Azure Data Explorer. It's another comparable data warehouse to Redshift. So it's kind of being able to move all the way across the stack, and we call them full stack developers. And I would definitely say that we are Scala and Java oriented right now, and that's like that's for the core project. At the application layer and the solution architect layer, and for those who are more interested in solutions for building solutions for customers, right? You'll see a lot more work there, which is related to integrating data sources, integrating with the Adobe Experience Platform, integrating with Salesforce, integrating with Twilio, integrating with all these different data sources in order to send them into the Adobe solutions to solve the product. So you can see there's need for solutions engineering, sales engineering, product development engineering. So it kind of runs the gamut across the across the full stack spectrum, and it's kind of the orientation. Your full stack developer is much more on the core development, whereas on the customer solutions, Python is much more reasonable as an expectation, right? Because there's much less of the Python development going on in the core, and that's primarily on the Java side. But on the machine learning and the AI side, it is Python is you have to know NumPy, scikit, and then it's more like GPUs. How do you use GPUs in order to do your modeling and model training? That's kind of a separate subgroup. What I'm finding though is that the data scientist core, they do a ton of data engineering, tons of data engineering. They probably spend 80% of their time doing data cleansing, getting the data aligned and in the right place, understanding features, like your feature modeling in AI. Most of the work is understanding what does the data coming in actually mean? How is that going to solve the problem, the question that we're trying to answer? And that often requires a deeper level of subject matter expertise of like, what is the quality of that data? How much does it need to be cleaned? How clearly is it coming in? How often is it coming in? Am I able to develop an audience, like a group from this data source that's scalable enough for us to be able to deliver marketing campaigns to them? Like, I still remember, like, we had some awesome insights, but we're like, oh, there's 50,000 people in that audience. And they're like, yeah, who cares? That's not enough. That's just not enough people for us to sell or to sell into or get measurable impacts on that. So I find the data science piece like is moving a lot to like subject matter expertise and engineering incorporating into that, and being able to work across those boundaries makes you a lot more flexible and able to plug into an organization and be relevant, especially with smaller companies. Smaller companies do not have, Adobe has very clear groups that have very specific needs, and it's definitely depth of knowledge within those very specialized areas. But in startups, it's like we're looking much more of the jack of all trades with a across the board experience. Adobe they tend to hire pretty specifically on a skill set for depth of knowledge. So that's kind of the difference between applying to a very mature organization versus into a startup organization.
When you are in the midst of hiring, what stage of the hiring are you looking at resumes? Are they filtered through somebody else first? And what is it that stands out to you for a resume for you to consider wanting to hire someone?
Yeah, it will. In my particular team, the key things that I look for are I need communication skills more so than they do in most engineering teams, because the layer that we're working on, we call it customer engineering, customer onboarding. And so as a regular part of our job, we are working with the consulting team, with the solution engineers, working with support, working with customers, and understanding the problem that they're facing. And then we are translating that information into something we can communicate and kind of package up for engineering so that they understand the challenges that are being seen by the customer, right? So the core technical skills need to be there, right? You need to be, solid, comfortable with a, development environment. You need to know, source code management, Git, definitely have your GitHubs handy, your contributions to the open source projects that you've worked on. Tagging yourself with what I've contributed to. That is always really big for me, because it shows, one, I'm interested, two, I'm taking out my time to basically contribute back into a broader community and demonstrating that contribution like in time. So I look for that as a strong asset. I look at projects that you've worked on in the past. websites that you've built, things that you've constructed and are proud of and are working on, right? Because it's, software is a marathon, right? We are not, there's some sprints, but at the end of the day, there's like this long-term, persistence that is required in order to make consistent, measurable progress, to objectives, to goals, and showing that kind of, that persistence over time, that ability to kind of stick to a project, develop it, live through the problems and the challenges and overcoming those and being able to keep on going and keep on working. It kind of, demonstrates to me just this, this continuity, this ability and willingness to stick with it and keep on going and keep on working on something, through ups and downs. I mean, it's not all rainbows and unicorns, right?
Mhm. When you were mentioning in resumes, you really are looking for, in your particular job, communication skills. What is it about a resume that would communicate that to you, that
Well,
they
some
have
of the,
them?
yeah, I'd say the key thing with when I think of communication skills, it's kind of like being involved, being
Mhm.
involved in the groups and clubs and it is, basically being out there. I'd say there's like the quintessential, like here's the software engineer working by themselves and in a dark room, and there's this notion that that software engineer is that's what software engineers do. They're very introverted. They have a are prickly personalities. Like we're working to kind of against that, because frankly the best software comes from a diverse group of people that are all looking at it from their different perspectives. And so you're going to find that a startup will be will a star a top-notch engineer will get a little more latitude, but as you go to a larger organization, your success is much more of your ability to work within a team, within a group, and contribute within that group, because the ability to work with others and to create something beyond what you as an individual can create, I think is key. So that's where I would say looking at projects where you're collaborating, collaborating with other engineers, using operational best practices. It's in Git. I know how to do monitoring. I understand what Grafana is. I understand how to look at operational charts. I understand how security works. Security is a big one. Like JWT. If you don't know JWT, you like it's everywhere. Like pretty much every integration right now that we do with a connector, from whether it's Salesforce, whether it's our product, Adobe Experience Platform, because we integrate with partners too. JWT is like the standard for security. So if you think of security, operations, performance, like the breadth of software, understanding the context in which it's running, where it's running, understanding Docker. How do I build this in Docker, make it portable, make it easy for others to be able to start up and run. All of these demonstrate the ability to kind of take something that's in your mind and basically bring it into a product that can be managed and operated by a broader team, leveraging all of those different skills that people have and overlapping to some extent to understand what their priorities are and understand what are the key pieces of information that they're going to need in order to be successful. Because your success is also their success. You're basically working together as a team, providing information and insights to be able to bring the entire product to a higher level. And so what I look for is more, demonstration of collaboration, demonstration of having worked across a team. And that's a lot of the area that I like, my area of interviewing, because the way that Adobe does it, they kind of going back to your initial question, there's basically we post all the resumes or the job descriptions online. That job description process is pretty involved at Adobe. Like we need to basically make sure it's covering the key aspects of the job, and then we assign an interview team for that particular job. Each person within that interview team has a different kind of area of emphasis, and my area of emphasis is creative problem solving, demonstrating the ability to overcome challenges. So that is the area that I get tagged with when I go through the interviewing process. There's somebody else who's basically doing more the hardcore technical review. Another one is looking at like I think it's working with others. Kind of the working within a team. The ability to work within the broader context of Adobe. And so each of us will kind of have our own area that we're focusing on. And then after we've gone through the interview process, had a series of candidates, we will basically then kind of review the different candidates, their relative strengths, and the areas where they think they're going to do better. Review that with the manager, because the managers, like as a senior manager, I'm more technical than my bosses, right? I mean, let me be clear. When you're in a big organization, the higher up you go, typically the less technical they become, right? So they rely upon us to make these assessments of like, hey, is this person going to be able to perform this task? And so part is also understanding from the manager of like, there's 4 different things that this role needs to provide within the organization. What are the key things that are like, we have time for them to grow into this, areas where they need to contribute immediately? And so that's a lot of the conversation that we have when we review the resumes in order to figure out which candidate is going to be best.
And then when you when the candidate comes in for the interview, well, okay, so when you say you are actually looking at their GitHubs, are you clicking through and checking them out? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So so what I'll get when there's an interviewee come in, they'll give me at least 1 week notice, so that we can get it scheduled properly. I will review the resume, look at the job experience. I'm focusing most on the most recent one, and then I'm looking at the projects and basically almost like their interests. Especially for the more entry level positions, there tends to be less. The experience tends to be less, right? Because it's a new engineer, and so there's much more of an emphasis on like the projects and kind of other indicators that say, that's interesting. When I interview them, I'm going to ask some questions about this, because this is an interesting way to demonstrate creative problem solving to problems and challenges that they've overcome, how they've creatively been able to overcome challenges that are presented, because that's a little more challenging when you haven't been a developer with multiple positions over the last 10 years, right? So it's kind of different when it is a more senior engineer. I'm looking more at what have they been working on lately, and then it's still cool to look at their projects that they're working on. But at that point, as a more senior position, it tends to be more around like, what is the area that they've been working on? What are the projects they've been working on? What specifically was their role in that project? And the key thing is, if it's on your resume, you need to indicate how well you know it. Because if you put Python on there and then you're not able to explain the difference between linked lists and dictionaries and data structures and a pandas data frame, like I'm going to be like, so how to write procedural Python, but you clearly haven't been doing too much object oriented or large scale system wide cloud enabled distributed architectures, right? So make sure that there's enough information when you say you understand a language. It's just like, here is what I know, here's what I've done, here's where I'm confident in, right? Because then I'll steer into your strengths, versus if you just say I know Java, I'll be like, great, okay, it's like, oh, I did, you give it a whole galaxy. It's like, these are the areas where I'm, I know Java, these are the areas where I'm strong in the areas that I know best, right? Because what you want to do is kind of set expectations so that you're getting relevant questions. And if it's outside that area, say, hey, I just haven't worked on that. This isn't a space that I'm interested in. It sounds cool, but haven't really done that too much. And what you're then building confidence in that potential hiree, someone looking to hire you, is that they can trust you to work within yourself and not leave them hanging saying, oh man, we just gave you something that was way beyond what you're able to do, and now we have to rejigger everything in order to kind of meet expectations. You really want to establish that trust and that confidence that you have sufficient judgment to understand yourself and not get stuck in a spot where you're like, uh-oh, you know, things happen, right? Things happen, no doubt, but showing that core of judgment, knowledge of yourself and what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with, that goes a long way to establishing that trust with that potential, manager, and that they can trust your judgment, because it's really where you want to be. You want to be in a spot where people aren't telling you what to do. You want to be in a spot where people are telling you what needs to be done. And you're given the latitude and the opportunity to fill in the blanks and to exercise good judgment on how to fill in those blanks. What are good decisions? What are not? Knowing that, I'm filling in this blank. This technology is something I'm less clear on. Let me check. Let me run this by them. Let me get some review on this with our resources. You want to demonstrate that you're exercising good judgment and working with your team to make sure that we're successful, because it's the whole team successful. Like if some members are not successful and some are, as a whole, all of us are not successful. So
yeah. I want to be really cautious of your time because it's already 11:40. Do you have time for some Q&A if anybody has
sure.
some? Thank you,
Yep.
Tom. Does anyone have any questions you want to throw out for Tom? I probably should have prepared you all ahead of time if you have anything you want to ask him about the interview process or successful and not successful candidates.
I have a question for Tom. Thank you again for presenting. What are some things you would tell someone maybe just starting in software engineering, or maybe even like a younger version of yourself, maybe some skills or some attributes that you think are kind of maybe like a little beyond like what you said, like hey, I guess that's.
I'd say the big one, Kennedy, is think of like so I trained in civil engineering. That was one of my majors and what I wish somebody would have explained to me about civil engineering when I first started was like, civil engineering does not change very fast, right? Once you're working on a 5-degree curve in a highway and highway design, and you go work for the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, you're going to be that 5-degree, highway angle design, and you're going to do that until you retire, right? And so what I would say is that throughout my career, every 3 to 5 years, I've had to reinvent myself in terms of the technology is just moving quickly. And so every job I've had, I've been looking at like, what would my next job be? What is the next technology that I would be interested in working on? Like, what is because that's what motivates me, is like I love new challenges. I love new problems to solve. And if you find you're not comfortable with ambiguity, or like, the fact that, they presented me a piece of software, they said, hey, we're shipping this in 2 weeks, make sure the JavaScript engine works. Like if the idea of that just makes you just like sweat, right? It's like, be careful of startups, because startups will make demands on you that before I'd gone into it, I would have thought it was inconceivable that they would ask this, right? And it's just the demand that, startups have to pivot so quickly that they really don't have the luxury of just being able to, it's like you have what you have. You fight the war with the people that you have, not the ones you wish you had, right? And so I would say, when you look at the different types of software engineering organizations that you're looking at, think about what are the kind of situations that are going to make you, say, yes, I enjoy this, or like, oh my God, like I can't believe I spent another 80-hour week and got woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning, like a couple times a week for the last 6-7 months. Because I mean, that's just some of the reality of startups. Like, we just have to do that. That is part of the job. There's less of that at Adobe, although our engineers are on call and everybody goes through the on call, but it's a little spaced out. There's a little more support. You're going to have SREs helping you out a little bit more, but it's kind of the nature of the of modern software development is that pretty much everybody is on pager duty and getting called, and that's just part of the process. So if that idea of like, of like continuously learning and evolving and reinventing yourself and having your job like kind of intruding upon your personal life, like it's tough, like, because software engineering nowadays, to stay relevant, like I'm looking, I measure myself in that every quarter I'm 50% more productive than I was the prior quarter. That's how I measure my effectiveness. Like, am I doing this well? If I'm doing this well, I'm able to measure 50% productivity gains quarter on quarter, every quarter. Like, my team has automated these things that we are doing and operating. It's taking less time to maintain and operate them. The teams that are using them are seeing productivity gains in terms of the time it takes for them to do the work. Like, this is software development. We are basically taking things that are complex, hard, take a long time, and squishing this down to being able to be done in a much shorter period of time. It is all about productivity and becoming more efficient, and it means that it does kind of consume your personal thoughts. Like when when I'm hiking, like I love to go hiking, and I start thinking about a problem, and if the idea of that intrusion on your personal time is something that you're like, oh, I'm gonna hate doing that, in order to really kind of thrive in the environment, you really need to live it, and get enjoyment from it. Like, if you find it tedious and that you hate it, then you're probably not going to like it long term, right? It's going to be tough. Now, there's still sales jobs, so people like technical salespeople as well. So there's other opportunities, but I'd say within software engineering, like really writing code for a living, that's really very much where I've seen the happiest, the engineers who are most enjoy their jobs. That's really the mindset and the headspace that they're working in, is that they enjoy it. I enjoy it. Like, some crazy challenges and the things that we've been through, and looking forward to the next set of challenges. So think about what you want to, what is your life, what do you picture your life being like? What does your everyday look like? And I'd say software engineering means a lot of learning for throughout your career, in order to really stay on top of it, or work on the things that you want to work on. Because if things are kind of formulaic and can be kind of put into a box and well described, those are the things we outsource, right? Because I'm like, here's the API, needs to do this on the transformation. This is why I like a lot of the the SAP and the module work for for vertical spaces. We see a lot of that moving overseas, because you have a known input, you have a known output, and you need to write the code in between, right? Pretty cut and dry. You know how to test the success on it. What we tend to work on in the US on software engineering, it is less clear exactly what needs to be done, and we need to innovate and figure it out, and adopt technologies, use good judgment, and kind of build new patterns. But the new patterns that we build today in 3 years are going to be formulaic and can be outsourced. So we need to work on the next set. So that'd be my advice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Any other last questions for Tom before we let him go?
My last comment would be, I am the people who've worked for me say I'm demanding and keep them busy. And so if you like that, that's good. If you don't like being busy and throw new challenges, because there's different managers as well, and different life experience within each of the teams. I just gravitate to big, nasty, ugly problems, because that's what I've been doing for my career. Some call it firefighting, but that's where I enjoy, and that's where opportunities lie too. Very rarely do I come into a situation where everybody's like, yeah, everything's running pretty smoothly, everything's pretty good, and like, yeah, it's fine, yeah, come on in. And I'm like, yeah, you probably aren't going to hire me for that.
Tom, I have one last question for you. What do you do for downtime? What do you do to decompress? And you said you mentioned
Exercise.
hiking. Okay.
Exercise. Yeah, exercise. Uh, I think that's a key one. Is if I feel like I'm keeping myself physically healthy, it it inc- it keeps me from going like getting depressed and
Yeah.
going into the darker, and just like getting kind of fed up with the frustration and bureaucracy that you inevitably run into. It I have to admit it's been challenging working at Adobe. I mean, it's just so different than the startups that it's you just find like, whoa, there's a person that needs to approve that. Like I usually just add that like, no, it's going to take a week to get that approval. And
Oh
so,
God.
yeah. So like
Yeah.
learning patience and like, those are the tough things. But yeah, I'd say for the downtime, I'd say, yeah, I also I still like to build things. So I like doing construction projects and, doing stuff around the house and yeah, building things. It's like, and yeah, so that's probably where I'd say.
Thank
And
you.
travel. And travel. I
Yes.
like
Yes.
traveling.
That's
Great.
great. Well, thank you so much, Tom. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your time in Ohio. And I can't
Mhm.
tell you how grateful we are to have you here today. Your advice, I took notes so I can, yeah, share it with our staff too. Thank you.
Yep. And I appreciate the opportunity and I encourage you all. Like I've been very happy, with working in software engineering. It's kind of reflecting on this. It's a challenging, interesting space. But I also know it's not for everybody. It definitely isn't. There definitely are, you know, aspects of software engineering that will drive, like my brothers are just like, man, you're crazy. You have to constantly, and they're just like, I can't believe you do that year after year after year. And it's just like, so yeah, you have at some level you have to enjoy it,
Yeah.
enjoy the problems and enjoy the challenges. And I
Yeah.
encourage you to, good luck on your journey as you find those places where you can thrive and, find a place where you're successful and enjoying it. So that's what I'd say. Awesome.
Thank you.
Great guys.
Awesome. Have a
Yep.
great Sunday. Thanks,
Enjoy.
Tom.
Good
See
day.
you
Thank
soon.
Bye.
you.
Bye. Okay, thanks. Thank you guys for joining. And Kennedy, I know we don't have a lot of time. I don't know what your time is like, but do you have some tips and things you'd like to share about your experience applying for internship?
Oh yeah, definitely. I actually have a presentation, but I can share it maybe
That'd be
after
great.
this.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know if people are strapped for time. I know it was originally from 11 to 12. So I don't know if maybe I can just like speed through the important parts of the presentation.
Sure.
If that would be helpful.
Can anyone stay a little bit beyond 12?
There's also, where there's going to be the recording afterwards. So I think I personally think it would be best if you get everything you wanted to say out, Kennedy, if you have the time. And then,
Okay.
Anyone who can't stick around that can follow up later and watch the recording.
For sure. Okay. Then with that, I guess I will get started.
Okay.
Today I'm going to be
Thanks for
talking
taking the
about,
time to do this too, by the way.
yeah, of course. I
Thank you.
love to share all the stuff I've learned the past 2 years. But yeah, today I'm going to be talking about recruiting. Can everybody see my screen okay? Okay, awesome. Today I'm going to be talking about recruiting, specifically for software engineering positions, like internships. And just like before we start, I just want to make a quick note. Recruiting is super stressful. I've definitely been through the process, but that's okay. I hope everybody here can like support one another in the process and kind of give each other referrals and give each other like a helping hand when they need it. Second thing is take my advice with a grain of salt. Each interview process is a little different. And I think when you interview, you have to make adjustments. So this is not like kind of the solution to everything, but maybe kind of like an overall guide. And yeah, this is mostly going to be about internships. I think there's some things that you can extract to maybe for full-time jobs, but for the most part, my experience kind of like is all from internships. And feel free to ask any questions. Actually, I realize that when I present, I can't really see, so feel free to just like unmute and just interrupt me if you have a question. But yeah, let's get started. So first is, what is recruiting, and why should you recruit, or why might you want to recruit? So when I came into college, I wasn't really sure what recruiting was or what that really meant. Recruiting is just a process of applying to internships, summer or otherwise, or even like full-time jobs. It's a great opportunity to learn within the industry and get experience, really see what you like. So whether that's like working for small, medium, large companies, what you kind of like in your work balance, work-life balance. I know Tom kind of talked about how he's like always thinking about problems. Some people kind of like to work and then just kind of like forget about it when they go home. I think both lifestyles are perfect, and it kind of really depends on what you like. So definitely internships are kind of like a way to like try out your different samples, like at like an ice cream shop. Also, you can see what you like in work culture. Some places are definitely more demanding, and other places are more lax. It really depends, yeah, on what you're looking for. And lastly, it's a great way to kind of pad your resume and help pave the way for full-time jobs or other opportunities along the way. I know Tom was looking for like things like tangible products that or projects that you worked on. This is a great way to help like build out your portfolio. Yeah, next, I'm gonna really get into like kind of the meat of it, which is like how you can get started. This is a pretty daunting task to tackle. I know it's kind of like a vague process for a lot of people just starting. But here are some things that you can use to get started. Just first is having a spreadsheet to keep organized, I think has been the most important thing for me. You keep track of portals and links and maybe applications, keep track of dates and things you have to do. So a spreadsheet is super important, whether it's Google Sheets, Excel, or Airtable, which is my preferred spreadsheet tracker. Then having a LinkedIn is super helpful. It's kind of like a digital resume that recruiters can just kind of click on and then see. It's useful for contacting them as well if you're like really interested. But I would be wary of scams or like fake offers from people, because they know that like people are looking for jobs. And so I think sometimes they like send like fake links or stuff. So definitely be careful. Then next is going to be a resume. I think this is super important to have. It's a great way to list experience and accomplishments. It's basically required for basically required for all job applications. So definitely having one handy is going to be super helpful. And then optionally a Handshake account if you're a college student. I don't really use this to apply to jobs, mostly just for finding them, because a lot of smaller companies tend to post their listings on there. And so if you're kind of like, you're not really like sure what to apply to, I think Handshake is a great opportunity, because generally all we hear about is kind of like the larger tech companies, Amazon, Google, Facebook, but there are also amazing opportunities to learn at smaller companies or mid-sized companies. So yeah. And next, this is kind of like the part of it. Once you've compiled a list of companies you'd like to apply for from Handshake or maybe other resources, it's time to apply. The process usually starts for larger companies. I know I didn't really put this down, but hopefully I can make a note of it later. The recruitment cycle kind of starts at the end of summer. I know that sounds really, really early, so you recruit a whole summer before, but that's only for larger tech companies. Smaller companies tend to recruit around the springtime. And it really is a game of attrition. Apply to as many as you can. And I think you have to be really comfortable with getting rejected or maybe getting ghosted. I've definitely had my fair share. Second bullet point is kind of like requirements are more like suggestions. Apply to positions that sound interesting. I know like sometimes they're like, oh, you need 3 years of Java or 3 years of C++. I think sometimes they stretch the expectations a little too far to where people like nobody applies unless you're like a senior level engineer. But I would recommend just applying. The worst thing that they could say is no. And so you can just apply again later. And try to apply through the company website. I found that Handshake or other application sites I haven't really gotten as many responses from them. And so I really recommend applying through the company website. And if you're really passionate about a job, this is actually how I landed my internship freshman year at Bolt, e-commerce company. I actually just emailed a recruiter and I was like, hey, I'm really interested. Do you guys have a position? And this was outside the timeline, kind of a little past when I think most people applied. It was around April or end of March. And they said, yeah, let me take a look. And then they were able to get me interviews and get me like through the process super fast. And so recruiters are really your friend. And so please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, the worst thing that they could say is like, no, please just apply through the website. And then at least they have your name now. Now they might recognize your name. They're like, oh, that's the person who emailed me. And it's definitely super helpful to get past resume rounds if they do accept, because I know that sometimes resumes are kind of like a hit or miss. They look at it for 30 seconds and they might toss it out. And so I think this is kind of the most agonizing process because they don't actually get to meet you. If they actually met you and like had a behavioral, maybe there's just some things that they were looking for that weren't there. But I feel like resumes are just kind of a shot in the dark. And lastly, it's like you only really need one. And so this is kind of going back to being comfortable with rejection. Getting ghosted or rejected is demoralizing, but it's important to keep your head up. I can personally tell you during freshman year, I applied to, I think like 200 plus, just copy and pasting my resume around. And getting ghosted and rejected was about like 80% of the time. But you only really need one. And you can only really do one, I guess, as well. So yeah, keep your head up. And next I wanna go into like kind of the different rounds that you might encounter. The first one being the behavioral. I think they generally lead with one. They generally ask you qualitative questions about yourself, like, oh, how do you describe yourself? What's your biggest weakness? And for this, I would say utilize the STAR approach. S being situation, T being task, A being action, and R being result. And so giving like a whole view of kind of the situation you've been in. This is just so you don't give like kind of one word answers or really short answers, because then they kind of are left scratching their head like, what did they really do in this scenario? And you can be a bit narcissistic, use I instead of we. That kind of quantifies your impact in the situation as opposed to kind of like a group effort. I think sometimes, especially in software engineering, you work within a team a lot. You really want to emphasize the work that you did. And then second is kind of just to embrace the nervousness. Recruiters know that interviewers are going to be nervous. You're applying for a position. And so you should strive to be perfect. Oops, some things in the chat. Oh, yeah, of course. Bye.
Sorry for interrupting.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, strive to be perfect, but be okay with a couple fumbles here and there. I've definitely had my own share of awkward interviews where I kind of like forgot what like I was saying mid-thought, or maybe I didn't elaborate on an example too much, and so they were also kind of confused. But they're really looking out for you, and they'll ask you questions. Just be okay with being nervous, and just know that's going to happen in some interviews. And yeah, you guys are both human. Sometimes interviewers are also they also kind of fumble the ball a little, and so as long as you guys can have a laugh, and just know that sometimes people make mistakes, I think you're perfect. Yeah, I guess that kind of paves the way into the third point, which is have some fun with it. Really try to be yourself. Make light of like situations, make light of maybe like things where you could have like done better in. I think interviewers kind of get stuck in like a loop of interviewing where it's just super serious all the time. I've personally had a lot of good luck with interviewers that I could crack jokes with, because I love to crack jokes, and you can kind of like inject your own personality. And they're ultimately looking for someone who.
Uh-oh. Kennedy froze up. Let's see if I can chat him. Ah, there he is. Hey,
I think my computer died.
that's okay.
But I'll send the link in the chat, and if somebody could maybe
Yeah.
share screens. Sorry, let me just
Sure.
pull this up really quickly. Sorry about
No
that.
problem. No worries. This is great.
Let's see. Oh yeah, I guess now would be a good time for any questions if you guys had any. While I finish this up or finish sharing.
I have to head out, but thanks, Kennedy, so much for the presentation. It was
Yeah, of
pretty
course.
helpful.
Thank you. Bye, Kaveen. Any other questions for Kennedy?
Okay, I think I got the link. Hopefully this works. Let's see.
Okay, I got it.
Awesome.
Okay, great. And we'll share.
Sorry, yeah, I'm also in a car right now. But hopefully it's not, the background isn't too distracting.
Totally fine. So I guess everyone can see it. So if you're all able to, let's see, it looks like Kennedy, you're on slide 7. Okay.
Okay, awesome. So actually, would it be possible for someone to share screen?
Yeah, I, for some reason, was having trouble sharing because it's for some reason not,
Wait, I think I was able to pull it up on my phone.
oh, okay. Yeah, we see it now.
Okay, awesome. I guess with that, I'll move on to kind of the technical round, which is kind of like the big part of the interview process. This is probably the scariest part for me personally. I generally find myself kind of doubting my technical ability, but I think it's important to not stress yourself out too much. Try your best to prep beforehand with maybe LeetCode or even CodingBat. CodingBat is a really good free resource if you're shaky on fundamentals, but I think LeetCode is best. And I think one of the best tips to start off with is just to pick a language you're familiar with and stick with it. Syntax can mess you up, and so if you're familiar with the language, I would just say like stick with that, because generally syntax errors can kind of throw you off and throw off your momentum. And I think the most important tip though during technical rounds is communication. Talk throughout the interview with your interviewer, as well as just kind of talking through your thought process. It can be a little intimidating to just be kind of sitting awkwardly as you code, and then the interviewer is just kind of watching you. And so maybe talk through your thought process, or if you're stuck, maybe ask them for a little help. I think I've definitely done that, and they've like given me a tiny hint that kind of helped open the gates to kind of solving the problem. And I think in the workplace, just from my experience working in internships, communication is one of the most important skills, if not the most important skill. So make sure to show it off, because you're going to be asking a lot of questions during your time, as well as communicating with other interns or maybe your manager. Definitely don't be afraid to ask for help if you're really stuck. I think being stuck and sitting there for about 40 minutes, not really knowing what to do, is a lot worse than just maybe asking for a hint. And definitely sometimes they might acknowledge that you're like willing to ask for help, and that might be a great trait as well. And lastly, just trust your skills and your knowledge of concepts. Be confident that you can do it. And the worst thing is that you maybe don't do as well in the technical interview as you wanted. But use it as a learning experience, and maybe use it as like some topics that you could practice next time. I've had a lot of recurring concepts, and so definitely I use each one as a learning experience. And the next one, I'm gonna go over like LeetCoding tips. You don't have to be like what I call LeetCode warrior, so you don't have to just grind LeetCode all day to get an internship. The important thing is doing it intentionally and doing it consistently. It's kind of like learning just in college or in high school. You need to make sure you practice those concepts every day, or maybe not every day, but maybe like once a week. Definitely don't rush through the problems. Don't just look at the solution, but actually try to identify learning objectives and important concepts within that problem, and maybe jot that down in a Google Doc, and maybe summarize each step. That way you can kind of look back and say like, oh, this is how I solved the problem. I have an approximate idea of how to do it, and that really helps you kind of do it in a real world scenario in an interview. Generally try to focus on mediums and easy. They have different tiers for how hard the problem is. I've only gotten a hard maybe once or twice, and they help guide me through the process. And so I will generally say mediums and easies are the sweet spot. I really love it when they give me easies. And yeah, just do a couple a week. You don't have to do it all the time, and make it really fit to your schedule, but try to do it consistently and try to do it diligently. I think that's the best part, or most important part. And the next slide is just some popular LeetCode topics that I've pulled up from my time coding and interviewing. Arrays, strings, graphs, sorting, data structures. Yeah. And lastly is once you've made past all those rounds, like technicals, behaviorals, that kind of stuff, you can negotiate sometimes your package or your benefits. And I think it's also a time to give yourself a pat on the back and really like congratulate yourself, because this is a really difficult process. It's really stressful as well. But yeah, some companies allow you to negotiate your salary and benefits. I would say definitely do your research on the industry and the area of your internship. Try not to overshoot your estimate because they might retract their offer, and that could be detrimental. And just see how similar positions at other companies are being compensated. I actually did some negotiating for my freshman internship. And it was really stressful for me because I was like, I don't want to oversell myself. I don't want to seem like super cocky, but I wanted to make as much as I could, but also like be compensated properly. And so I did a lot of research looking at positions on like Glassdoor, maybe asking on Reddit, or like asking maybe fellow like friends who have already done some work in the industry. Yeah, just be confident with how you approach your negotiations during the talk. And if they, I guess, like kind of push back against like your offer, it's also okay to like be comfortable with saying like no to it. I think if they're compensating you like way too little, definitely say something. This is especially common in startups. During the fall, I was trying to find a startup at Berkeley, like a student startup, and I think their compensation was way too low. And it just wasn't worth my time to all the time I put in throughout the week. And so, yeah, definitely just be comfortable saying no. And lastly is just kind of recap of things I learned throughout the process. Again, super stressful for everyone. LinkedIn is not real life. You might see like people saying like, oh, I got this offer. Thank you to my managers and all this stuff. But I think people emphasize kind of the best parts of their life. So just remember that it's going to be a marathon, and that other people are also working hard towards their goals, and you're not alone in the process. And comparison is the thief of joy. Be proud of all you've accomplished so far, and definitely keep shooting towards your goals. But yeah. And second is being organized. Being organized is super important. Keeping track of deadlines, keeping track of portals, keeping track of emails. And that's where a spreadsheet comes in. It's definitely saved my butt a bunch of times. And then also make sure to communicate candidly with not only your interviewers, but with your managers, with other interns. Be personable and like take your time to think through your responses as you interview. I think sometimes people get too rushed. They get a little antsy trying to like answer questions. I think maybe a slight pause sometimes is really helpful for showing that like, oh, you really thought about this question and you're giving like a very genuine answer. And next is asking for referrals. If you have a friend who's maybe working someplace and they just finished up, you can ask them for a referral. And that helps you kind of like get fast tracked past the resume round. And that can actually do like a whole bunch of good for helping you get through the process and securing that internship. And so referrals, definitely don't be afraid to reach out to people and just ask for referrals, or just ask your friends. And then I guess this is kind of the same as being organized, but try to make templates to make your application process faster and easier, just basically more efficient. When I applied to 200, I didn't like personalize each application. I did a lot of copy and pasting, but I had to make sure my templates were really good before you can copy and paste. So spend more work up front, do less work later, I think is the motto I have. For companies that you're really passionate about though, personalize it. It definitely shows unique interests besides just like maybe the copy and paste responses that they see. And so that can also do you a lot of good. And lastly is, again, just be consistent and intentional with your internship search. It can be kind of a slog, but if you're consistent and you do like a set of applications every week and you practice every week, then eventually like builds into like 200, 300 applications, and hopefully you can secure an internship at that time. If not though, keep going at it. You will eventually get one. And yeah, that's kind of it for my presentation. I know it was a bit long, but thanks for sticking with me.
No,
Yeah,
it's
just know that.
perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kennedy. Does anyone have any questions for Kennedy? Thank you for doing it from your phone too, from your car.
Of course.
And then we'll share, can you share the link to, oh, I have the link. I can share it with everybody. You're okay with that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
Great. And then, you know, I want to make this an open invitation. If anybody ever wants to send me your resume to review and to look at and give you tips and advice on, I look at a lot of resumes, and there's definitely certain ones that stand out to me. And so if you want me to edit even, I'm known to be a bit of a ruthless editor, so I'm happy to look at stuff and just send it on to me. Great. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your Sunday to talk with us and to be here. And I wish you good luck as you pursue your next job from here. I think David and I started this school with the idea that, you know, we want to educate kids, but we also wanted to support our staff too and help you become the best employee you can be at your next job. And so I find that like a really actually fun part of this job too, is like helping to launch many of you. So thank you for, yeah, working with us and being the amazing individuals that you are, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Take care.